Good Sunday morning. This is Micah Mitchell with Madison County Weather Updates. I want to give you a quick update on how the storm setup is looking for this afternoon because there have been some changes made by the Storm Prediction Center, changes that I told you yesterday I thought might be made. Told you yesterday I thought that a slight risk for severe should be added in, and that has in fact been done, and it does include Madison County as slight risk for severe primarily this evening for us, and all or not all modes, but tornado threat remains on the table, and damaging winds are the main threat. So here's a look at the overall outlook. Here's the tornado outlook for today, and Madison County remains in a 2 to 4% risk for tornadoes. You can see that back here is the front is going to come through earlier in the day, back here into eastern Illinois, western Indiana, west central Indiana. So that's why there's a higher tornado threat back there, 5 to 9% risk back there. The front's not going to get here until early evening, so that reduces the tornado threat. And then, of course, we've got for us, damaging winds are the main threat, 15 to 29% risk. And that's this, when I say percent risk, this is risk of this event occurring within 25 miles of any given point. So it doesn't mean everybody, obviously, not everybody gets a tornado. So damaging winds are going to be a lot more likely today, and even outside of thunderstorms we're going to be at risk of wind gusts up to 50 miles per hour. There is a wind advisory out for today, regardless of thunderstorm activity, so we can expect some minor damage to occur. Unfortunately, some maybe some power outages occurring because the winds are going to crank up, and I'll show you winds are going to crank up, and they're going to stay pretty gusty for several hours. So here's a high resolution rapid refresh model. And this is beginning at 2 o'clock this afternoon. Most of the day will be dry, but there can be some patchy showers go through. It's not looking like there's going to be anything organized ahead of the line, but if something were to pop individually ahead of the line, that would be where the greatest supercell risk would be. As you can see, we begin to see our line really take its shape here. This is by 5 p.m. as it begins to take its shape, and you can see it is still kind of isolated in nature as it begins to pop. And then back there is where the greatest tornado risk is. It begins to form into a pretty good line by 7 p.m. and is moving closer to Kokomo and Indianapolis. And then by 8 p.m., it's coming through Madison County. And again, we're right on the eastern edge of that slight risk of severe. We do remain in a 2 to 4% risk for tornadoes. So, sometimes these not so great setups seem to be when they actually happen. So we'll keep an eye on that and I'll go live if I need to go live. Again, this is around 8 p.m. So I would say our severe threat window here in Madison County, because timing can change slightly, is going to be between about 7 and 9 p.m. The way things are looking right now. Then that blasts on into eastern Indiana by 9 p.m. and by 10 p.m. it's off into Ohio. And once that goes through, the other thing we'll watch for will be snow showers kind of coming down. Some of the Most of the data kind of wants to keep these off to our east or in our northeast, but I will say that I would expect some snow showers during the day tomorrow. So but the main thing, the story is again going to be the winds. So here's a look at the wind gusts. These are gusts. This is not constant winds. Our Once we get into the afternoon, our sustained winds are going to be 20 to 30 miles per hour with gusts. This is by 1 p.m. We're looking at gusts, getting into the upper 30s, lower 40s, and then as we get into the mid afternoon, we're looking at wind gusts as much as 40 to 45, and these are non-thunderstorm winds. Back here is our actually the beginnings of our storm cluster, and you see us well ahead of the storms. We're seeing wind gusts in the mid 40s, and then here comes our 8 p.m. Here comes our line of storms, and embedded in that there could be some 55, 60 mile per hour wind gusts with some of these cells that come through, and then that line presses on through. But then we're still looking at wind gusts in the upper 30s, lower 40s. So, and this is 3 o'clock in the morning. The winds are still cranking away, and then you can see reinforcement uh, as we get onto the backside of this low pressure system and the Arctic air really begins to plunge in. Then this is by 6 a.m. Again, we're looking at non thunderstorm winds, 47, 48, 49 miles per hour as modeled. So I'd say 45 to 50. And as we get into the day tomorrow, here's by 11 a.m. tomorrow, still winds howling out of the northwest. And then as we get into tomorrow afternoon, they die down a little bit, like to the mid 30 to 40 mile per hour range. I would say most of the day tomorrow we're going to be looking at winds gusting 30 to 40 miles per hour still, and it's going to be cold, so it's not going to feel good tomorrow. Winter, it's going to feel like spring today, and it's going to feel like winter tomorrow. And then the winds finally begin to drop below 30, gusts begin to drop below 30 miles per hour by late tomorrow evening into early Tuesday. So it's going to be very windy. It's going to be very cold once we get on the backside of this front. Here's a quick look at temperatures so you can see how quickly we change. Um, the HRRR might actually be slightly underdone. It's already, as of 11 a.m., it's already 62 degrees. But you can see this is by 4 p.m. We're in the mid 60s. The record high for Anderson today is 63 degrees, set 1984, I believe it was. So we're probably going to beat that record. We're already sitting right on the edge of it right now at 11 a.m. But you can see as we get into the afternoon, you see exactly where that front is. Here's at 7 p.m. Madison County's in the lower 60s. 8 p.m. we're in the upper 50s. 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. excuse me, we're in the now down into the upper 40s. And then as you move on, we get into the overnight hours. Since by 2 a.m. we're already down to the lower 30s, and then by morning we're in the lower 20s. The only reason absolute temperature isn't going to be colder than this is because of the wind. It's going to feel a lot colder, but the air temperature actually won't be able to drop as much when you're windy. There's a little more friction in the air. It keeps the absolute temperature up, but the wind chills will be uh, will be something else. And then we'll stay in the 20s all day tomorrow. Last thing is we'll look at the wind chills, and here's at 9 p.m. the we still feel like we're in the upper 50s, but watch how quickly this changes. We get behind the front. Here's 2 hours later, we already feel 20 degrees colder. This is by 11 p.m. And then it feels like temperatures by the time we get into 4 a.m. we're already feeling like we're in the lower teens. And then as we reach down to about 7 a.m., this has got us in the HRRR has us staying a little bit warmer with the wind chills, but still lower single digits. I really wouldn't be surprised by sub-zero wind chills, quite frankly. But just know it is going to feel very brutal. Within a 12-hour period, we're going to go from feeling like we're in the 60s to feeling like we're close to zero. So that's what I've got for you for right now. Again, if anything changes with the severe later on, I will let you know. But again, Storm Prediction Center has us in a slight risk for severe, with damaging winds as the main threat, and tornadoes also being isolated tornadoes being a risk as well. This is Michael Mitchell with Madison County Weather Updates. Have a great day.